Well, it's nice to see everyone this evening. Welcome to Sabbath Collective, a community of people interested in celebrating the Sabbath and pursuing God through a Hebraic Eastern worldview. We're going to begin our time together this evening with the lighting of the Shavuos candles. And traditionally, the mother of the home lights the Sabbath candles. And traditionally, she encircles the candles 3 times with her hands, which is a gesture of welcoming in the Sabbath. And again, these candles that we light represent peace, joy, and unity. Blessed are you, O Lord our God, who leads us into wisdom, love, and a sound mind. Hey, Rebecca, great to see you, honey. Hey, Ian, good to have you with us tonight. Shabbat Shalom. Randall, I saw you too. Phoebe is saying it's nice today. That's good, because some of us are in snow. Hey, Beth, great to see you, honey. Shabbat Shalom. So tonight, we get into it. How to not become delusional with strength, love, and mastery of mind. So with what we have been living through in this country and in much of the world, unfortunately, we are all questioning how people can believe these outrageous, as people call them, big lies. To believe a fabricated conspiracy theory is one thing, but when that fake conspiracy theory takes complete control over your logic, your relationships, and your life, that becomes delusion. Delusional conspiracy beliefs are what we witnessed on January 6th. So if you missed last week's teaching, please listen to last week's teaching, where we talked through how false conspiracy theories work and why people believe them. So let's get started. The guard against delusion is to recognize patterns and connect to narrative threads, but with strength, love, and mastery of mind. So let's just look at this one more time. The guard against delusion is to recognize patterns and connect to narrative threads, but with strength, love, and mastery of mind. So we need to understand some things. And as you know, we've been talking through these things. Our brains were designed for us to recognize patterns for our very survival. If you are, let's say, an ancient fishing person living on the sea, and you notice when the sky becomes red in the morning, that sudden swells can happen that can capsize your canoe, you will see a pattern of, as the saying goes, red sky in the morning, sailors take warning, right? But then when you notice when the sky is red at night, and maybe it's perfect the next morning for fishing, red sky at night, sailors delay. So again, seeing patterns in life is also, it's important for our survival, and it's also important for our creative faith design. God uses the narrative thread in story to speak to us, to teach us, to guide us. So it is very important that we know we are designed by God to see patterns. However, because of the survival design of our brains, we can jump to conclusions all too quickly. For instance, 37% of Americans believe climate change is a hoax. And why do you think that is? Maybe because it's cold and snowing in the Northeast right now, like where Aaron is. Hey, Catherine, good to see you. Good to have you with us. Shabbat Shalom. Hey, Mary, great to see you. Shabbat Shalom. So again, it's cold and snowing, so it must not be real. And then our algorithms, our media algorithms feed into this as well. And as we all know, what you click on is what you see. So there are certain people also more predisposed to making leaps in seeing patterns than others. So again, just to recap, all of us are designed to see patterns, to make connections, to see the narrative thread, so to speak. But some of us are more predisposed than others in leaping and seeing these patterns. And one way, which is really interesting, that they found to that shows who's more likely. Jim says it doesn't personally affect them directly in the here and now today. Yeah, exactly. Which is why sometimes people aren't open to new things if it's not in their face. Hey, Chris, great to see you. Shabbat Shalom. Hope you all are well and keeping warm. So again, one of the groups of people that psychologists have studied that seem to be more predisposed to believing these kinds of dangerous conspiracy theories are found in a group of people that were studied where if you flip a coin 3 times and 3 times it comes up heads, keep track of with me here, and you're one of those people who believe there's a higher chance of it to be tails on the 4th toss, because there was 3 heads earlier, there's got to be tails on the 4th toss, when in fact it's 50% chance no matter how many times. You are actually more likely to believe in conspiracy theories, sociologist says, because you may tend to make deductions through, follow this, observational patterns rather than logic. So let's just sum it up. If you flip a coin, you have a 50-50 chance. Some statisticians say 51%, but basically it's 50-50% chance. If you get heads 1 time, heads 2 times, heads 3 times, and you go to flip it again on the 4th time, if you are predisposed to believe in conspiracy theories, you're going to think that 4th time is going to be tails because it was already 3 times heads. Okay, so that's a good clue. So how many of us would think that it would be tails? We got to guard ourselves. We have to check ourselves. Aaron says that's you. Okay. Yeah, and it's the way that we think. Some of us think because we're seeing patterns and we think. But again, those observational patterns overrun logic. And that's when we can get into trouble. So that's a really good example. 2 Timothy 1:7, we all kind of know this verse, I'm sure, says, "For God gave us a spirit who produces," and this is a Hebrew translation, so it's a little choppy. "God gave us a spirit who produces not timidity," which that Greek word means cowardice. A lot of our versions say fear. But power, and that means how we think it means, power, but it's actually an innate power. It's not a power that you have to find or you have to muscle through. It's in you all along. It's innate. Love, and that definition of the Greek word for love means goodwill and self-discipline, which is the Greek word sophronismos. Now, this is a really interesting word here. Oftentimes our Bibles will translate this sound mind. God hasn't given us a spirit of fear, but a power and love and a sound mind. How it's translated here, self-discipline, sophronismos, it's 2 Greek words, sous, which means sound, and phren, which means understanding, P-H-R-E-N, which means understanding. Now, phren, the Greek word phren is literally the diaphragm. And in the Greek world, figuratively, the diaphragm is the seat of mental and emotional activity. So the first part of this, again, means sound. Greeks connected breathing sounds with all of this. So in other words, emotions and thoughts, this word is emotions and thoughts which are outwardly seen with calm breathing are considered disciplined, a disciplined mind. So it's not just about the mind, is it? It's about stabilizing the whole being. So God hasn't given us cowardice, but power and love and a stabilized whole being. And connecting this concept with Hebraic thinking, The book of Proverbs tells us that wisdom, understanding, and instruction all go together to bring us into alignment with the character of Yahweh. Wisdom is the Hebrew word chokmah, and it's about right action. Understanding is the Hebrew word bin, and it's about distinguishing good from evil, making the right choice. And instruction is the Hebrew word musar, and it's about choosing correction and discipline when necessary. Because sometimes things need to be corrected and disciplined when necessary, right? Some people think no, and they just want to draw on their sketch pads or read books and put their feet up while the court is going on. But for others of us, we know that there is a right time, and that this word musar is about choosing correction and discipline when necessary, right? Right action, right choices, the right corrections. All of these ideas are present in the Hebrew view of a mastery of mind. And this is key for us to not fall into delusions. Let's see what y'all are saying. Jim, with the exception that you are here participating in this discussion, absolutely, Jim, puts you miles ahead of conspiracy theorists. Yes, and you're really going to know why that is in a bit. But yes, very true. Aaron is open and listening. Hey, Evelyn, good to see you, honey. Shabbat shalom. Hey, Mike Bartell, good to see you. Sup back to you. So first thing we do, how do we do this? How do we have mastery of mind, as it says? So first thing, keep it simple. Occam's razor is plurality should not be posited without necessity. Let me read that one more time. Plurality should not be posited without necessity. Now, what does that mean? That's the actual Occam's razor. And this comes from a Franciscan friar and theologian named William of Occam. But it's often paraphrased like this. The simplest explanation or solution is often the right one. Okay, that's Occam's razor. Don't overcomplicate by falling for convoluted theories of events. A big lie, as they call it, is often used successfully today because it's so outrageous and repeated so often that people think it couldn't possibly be made up. Remember, extraordinary claims should require extraordinary evidence. Most likely, again, the simplest explanation is the true one, most likely. So the very first thing we have to know is keep it simple. When we learn, when we hear things, when we read things, the simplest explanation is usually the true one. The more convoluted it gets, the more likely it is to not be factual. Are you with me on that? Number two, and this is a big one, and we all know this one well. Do your research. One who doesn't think, Proverbs 14:15 says, one who doesn't think believes every word, but the cautious understands his step. Whew! How much should this verse be everywhere? One who doesn't think believes every word, but the cautious understands his step. We talked about this last week when we talked about why delusional conspiracy theories are and why people believe them. But listen, these beliefs have a force, they have a power, and that's why it's so important that the cautious understand our steps. We must not just believe every word. We must do our research. Sometimes all it takes to convince someone of something is, and again, it could be some really inane conspiracy theory, is to put out an emotional YouTube video, which is why I don't normally watch mainstream news media. Because again, It's all about the entertainment. It's all about the quick hook. It's all about it getting addicted to the adrenaline high you get with the drama. There are news outlets that are more solid simply because their articles are well researched and not about entertaining you, but informing you. You cannot get real factual news through a tweet or through a post. Can I get an amen on that? Okay? It's impossible. So again, do your research before you just take this stuff in. All right, here's the quote of the night. Don't swallow what you can't chew. Hey, Luz, good to see you, honey. Love you. Great to have you join us. Don't swallow what you can't chew. And this is just common sense, right? If you don't have time to digest it, it's just going to sit there like a rock. Don't swallow what you can't chew. What you swallow needs to be chewed first. That's where the research comes in. Let me see what Rebecca says. People also don't know how to discern disinformation. Exactly. And we talked about that last week. Misinformation, which is maybe unintentional or ignorant or misremembering or whatever, facts that aren't facts, right? And disinformation is more weaponized misinformation. In other words, it's intentionally trying to mislead. And you're right, Rebecca, it's very hard to figure out sometimes what disinformation really is. But again, research, do your research. Don't swallow what you cannot chew. Okay. Tim Levine has some remarkable research about why people can be victims of deception, why they can kind of believe this fantastical stuff. And what he's found is it's because they often just believe what they're being told. So, and the reason for that is very physiological. We actually don't have the bandwidth to check everything that we hear, to research everything that we hear or read, or to be suspect of everything that everyone says to us. We don't have the bandwidth to do that. So again, it's almost why we really need to be careful about what we expose ourselves to. If you don't have the time to do the research and to chew what you're about ready to swallow, don't even read it. Reserve sharing it and push pause on having an emotional reaction to it until you have time to do your research, until you have time to chew that before you swallow it whole. Are you with me? I know that's easier said than done, which is why my suggestion is if you don't have time to do it, don't let it pass the gates, right? The eye gate or the ear gates into the heart. Don't let it come without filters, without fact checking it. It's a very important thing to guard our hearts with this. Let me see. Mike Bartel. Do not bear false witness. Exactly, Mike. And when we share things too quickly before that we've had a chance to fact check them, that's exactly what we're doing. We're bearing false witness. Exactly. And it's gossip. You're exactly right. Alexandra likes that. And Chris Routon, 100 amens. Yeah, I could. Baha, yes, also good. Love and eating metaphor, Alex. Randall says a comparative analysis across a spectrum of concepts or ideas tends to lead to what's principle and what's practical. Very good, Randall. So good. Read that statement again, y'all. That's a good one. Common sense, Chris is saying. Maybe there should be a whole series. Absolutely. Hey, Stephanie, great to have you join us from New Jersey. Shabbat Shalom. Rebecca says people can find research to justify just about anything they believe. I'm going to get into that in 1 second, Rebecca. Randall is saying there's a saying that nothing pains a more person. Yep, and I have that quote by Dr. King, Randall, at the end. Y'all are just right with me on this, right? So again, number 2, do your research. Number 3, these are very common sense, right? Number 3, use curiosity. Delusional conspiracies will not hold up under questions. And that is a really simple and true truth. Malcolm Gladwell has a master class on writing, and someone gifted me with this recently, and I loved it. I watched his whole master class on writing, and he had one lesson in particular that was in this whole master class, which was how to read. And he told a story about how he was reading what the NFL senior president for health and safety, Jeffrey Miller, wrote. And he notices here, Jeffrey Miller, who was the head at the time he's reading this of health and safety for NFL, with all the concussions and everything that's going on with health and safety with the players, this is the guy that heads it up, right? So he's reading his publicity things, his statements, and he notices that there's no doctor in front of his name. So Malcolm Gladwell thinks, why didn't they call him Dr. Miller? Who is this guy that is the head of the NFL health and safety? And Gladwell says, no, it can't be. Why would they employ a person in charge of health and safety that's not a doctor? It's all about being curious and how we read things, right? So he tells the story. Malcolm Gladwell begins to research, and it takes him a very long time because it is not readily available, what he's looking for, right? People don't want it to be readily available. But he finds out that Jeffrey Miller is indeed not a physician. In fact, he is an antitrust attorney. He began his career on an antitrust committee for the Senate Judiciary Committee. And that person who was hired as the NFL health and safety head to make sure the players are safe is the person that can make sure the NFL doesn't lose their antitrust status. Now, once you find out who this person really is, you have to ask yourself, as Malcolm Gladwell did, what is his priority? Can you trust his medical advice? Malcolm says when you read someone's response, you generally tend to their words. And that is very true. But here's the thing, we must look beneath, which is why Malcolm Gladwell was able to realize that there was an agenda here, and it wasn't the health and welfare of the NFL players, right? We must look beneath. We must allow for this curiosity to help us explore and search and ask questions of what it is that we're reading or we're hearing. Questions are beautiful. Randall, people can research, Rebecca says, point well taken. When we research without a desired end, we could end up with more questions and answers and may possibly have to give ground to what has been a cherished position. Absolutely, Rebecca. Absolutely. And that's a healthy thing for us, right? That's the evolution of learning. Jim posted some little pictures there. Adorable. So, again, we must look beneath. Number 4. Okay? Number 4, and this is the last thing. Test. 1 Thessalonians 5:21 says, but do test everything. Hold on to what is good. Do test everything and hold on to what is good. Of course, the big response when people are asked, again, this is test. We test things. Of course, the big response when people are asked for their sources, right, is usually, it's what I believe. It's my truth. Any assertion of expertise produces an explosive, angry response. As some social scientists are calling it now, we're witnessing the murder of expertise. The murder of expertise. Those who are angry are quick with claims like, oh, well, that's just elitism. But listen, here's what we need to know. Having equal rights does not mean having equal talents, equal education, equal intelligence, equal abilities, or equal knowledge. What has died is the acknowledgement of expertise as anything that should change our thoughts or change the way we live. And this is really a disaster. There's a rejection not only of knowledge, but of the ways in which we gain knowledge and how we learn. And everything just becomes about my own feelings, my subjective truths. Now, in the media, what we often see today is sometimes when journalists, out of laziness, want to get two sides of an issue, sometimes they'll interview, let's say, a scientist, and then instead of getting an equal counterpart to counter what that scientist may be saying, they go to some pop yoga blogger, okay, who has an opinion. And those two opinions are treated equally. Do you ever see that? Do you ever see this happen to you with people where maybe we'll be talking about issues like social justice or racism, and some white person will talk about why Black people shouldn't feel like this? We see it all the time. They're trying to get two sides or two opinions, but in fact, one person is actually the expert and one person really shouldn't be compared to that person. So who are you relying on? Because many people are woefully uninformed. And none of this ignorance stops people from arguing as though they were research scientists or economists or sociologists or constitutional lawyers. Nowadays, anyone can print anything as a medical expert and not be subject to any kind of peer review. It's just out there. Test. And then there's also human nature. Now, in particular, there's something called the Dunning-Kruger effect, which is kind of funny, but it's really being talked about a lot. The Dunning-Kruger effect. Have you ever heard of this before? Because it's actually a fantastic effect. Chris is saying, is this a metaphor about Betsy DeVos? Yes, it could very well be, Chris. Absolutely. That's a perfect example. Jim says, I think that example would have been too obvious. Yeah, I wasn't actually thinking about her, but she would be the perfect example of what I'm talking about. Someone with this platform to speak about something that they really know nothing about, and you give that equal weight with someone who is an expert in that. So let's get back to the human nature, the Dunning-Kruger effect, which is that people with a low ability to accomplish a task oftentimes overestimate their ability to do so. And it happens quite frequently. People with a low ability to accomplish a certain task often overestimate their ability to do so, and it's called the Dunning-Kruger effect. So the last thing a person operating under the Dunning-Kruger effect wants is to encounter experts who are educated, who are experienced, and who are more qualified to disagree with them. They don't want to deal with that. Now, let me just balance this out a bit. To be ruled by experts only is not healthy, okay? In other words, we don't just default to people that are supposed to be the experts, right? That's not healthy. But neither are uninformed authoritarians. Having a strong opinion about something isn't the same as knowing something. Critical thinking is critical, okay? It's very, very important. Now, let me give you an example of what this looks like in just a practical way of life. We had someone in our Sabbath Collective community call me, I think it was yesterday, and she is a healthcare worker, and she just got her immunizations for COVID-19. She just was immunized. She got both of her immunizations. And I was very happy for her that she did. She was dealing with older folks. There was a lot of issues there. And she did her research before she did. And she, again, this was something that she felt a peace about doing and felt like it was a wise thing for her to do. Well, a friend of hers A churchy friend of hers sent her a link after she got both immunizations about the dangers of this, quote, immunization, which isn't really an immunization, is what they're saying. And this woman in our community didn't want to put fear in her heart. She already got the immunization. She didn't want to, as I was saying before, if you don't have time to research it, don't let it go past your eyes or your ears. Don't swallow what you can't chew, right? So she didn't have time to do it. So she called me up and she asked me if I knew anything about this. Was there something going on that was dangerous? And I took a look at the info that her Christian friend sent her. I clicked on the link first to see the videos that were posted, and it was by a doctor. And then I saw the doctor's name. And I researched who the doctor was before I watched the video. Now, she was arrested at the insurrection on January 6th. She actually broke into, with the riotous group, into the Capitol. She is a proponent for one particular medication that politicians have been touting as a cure and a prevention of COVID, and she is a giant anti-masker. And she was the one who spearheaded the group where that doctor from Africa who believed that demons give women cancer by having sex with them also spoke. You may remember that. She was the founder of that group, okay? So here's what I want you to know. As soon as I found out who the author of that, who the person speaking in that video was, the source matters. And as we learned last week, the Hebrew word kishar, the Hebrew word that we looked at as it was mentioned in Samuel concerning Absalom and David, kishir is an alliance based on a lie. Kashir is an alliance. It's the Hebrew word for conspiracy. Kashir, the Hebrew word for conspiracy, is an alliance based on a lie. Okay? And this is where a lot of the information that we get is coming from. Kashir, an alliance based on a lie. Which means we have to test. We have to test. Aaron says, churchy friend, moniker of death. Rebecca says, don't tell the internet that strong opinions aren't the same as knowing. Exactly. Stephanie says, the death of expertise, the campaign established against established knowledge and why it matters. Is that, you know what, Stephanie? I believe that Tom Nichols is the person who coined that phrase. You're exactly right. And I think I read that article. Explains a lot of what is going. Actually, it's a book, I believe, right? Stephanie, you can verify that. It explains a lot of what is going on now. And then a lot of people have taken that phrase, the death of expertise, and they're using it. And I think it's a really great phrase. The death of expertise. It was murdered. Okay. So in this world we live in, a true truth, right? Let me give you this. Adonai did not give us the spirit, as we said in the beginning, of being a fearful coward, but he gave us innate power, love to do good for others, so we may exercise the good actions, the good choices, and the good corrections, which by the way, corrections are very much a part of this, right? So let's look at Dr. King. Rarely do we find men who willingly engage in hard, solid thinking. There is an almost universal quest for easy answers and half-baked solutions. Nothing pains some people more than having to think. That's just so well put, and we would all say amen to that. Keep it simple. Do your research, use curiosity, and test. And this is how we guard against becoming delusional. I love you all. Shabbat Shalom. Let's keep on being in touch with this. And oh, yes, it's a book, Stephanie is saying. No, I definitely didn't read the book. I may have read an excerpt. Thank you for that, Stephanie. Let's keep in touch with how this is working. I feel like this quote described almost half of the judges in the current impeachment trial. Absolutely, Jim. I completely agree. The laziness of people to engage in facts and looking at facts, and it's so much easier, as Dr. King says, easy answers and half-baked solutions. And of course, this is before we had tweets, right? I'm sure if we could revise this, it would be and tweets, right? Because again, nothing pains some people more than having to think. And we need to make sure we're not trusting those people. So Shabbat Shalom, everyone. I love you. We're in this together. I'll see you next week.